Okay, gang, I feel the urge to apologize because I just couldn't take it anymore. While I was uploading videos, I went ahead and configured VMweb. So if we take a look at VMweb from the perspective of the unit here, I should be able to ping my gateway, which is 172.168.103.254, which I can hit my gateway. And I should be able to hit the addresses of the other virtual machines, 102.1, I have reachability, and 101.1 I have reachability. So everything's working as I would expect it to work. And if we take a look at the network security configurations, and from there we go and we look at those logical switch, you'll see now that I have the four total, the one between the distributed logical router and the edge services gateway, the logical switch between VM app and the DLR, the one between VM database or VLAN 102 and the DLR, and then lastly the one that you didn't see me configure, which is 103. Also, if we go in and we take a look at the SSX and we look at the DLR, what we'll see here is I actually have three interfaces now. If I go to the interfaces tab, and those are the interfaces that are reporting towards the groups. So with this being done, all I need to do now is get the integration between the ESG and the DLR. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another interface to the DLR. And from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this the VNIC2, and I'll say the ESG. So that's going to be my Edge Services Gateway. It is an uplink in this instance. And from this, I will go ahead and select the LS ESG DLR logical switch that I created. And I'm going to give it an IP address. We said that this device, which is the DLR, is going to have the IP address of 172.16.100.253/24. We'll go ahead and hit add here. Let's let it create that interface. And we should see that that is now connected. So VNIC2 ESG. So the other thing that I want to do now is I want to go in and verify, and not verify, but to configure the ESG. So I'm just going to go to networking and security. I'll go back down to NSX edges. From NSX edges, I'm going to go to the Edge Services Gateway. Under settings, I'm going to go to interfaces. And from here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pick another interface. I'll pick VNIC1. I'm going to highlight it. And then what I'll do is I'm going to edit it, and we're going to make this an interface that's going to lead down to the DLR. So I'm going to say VNIC to the DLR, and in this instance it's going to be an internal interface. I'm going to make it part of the LS ESG DLR, and I'm going to go ahead and give it an IP address, and this guy's going to have an IP address of 172.16.100, and this is going to be 254/24, and let's go ahead and see if we can't get that deployed. And ultimately it should go live. And there we are. It is up, operational, and connected. So as verification, what I want to do now is I'm going to go back to one of my hosts. So let's go back to, say, for instance, database. And from database's perspective, I know that I can ping my gateway. So if I come over here and from database I'm in VLAN 102, I'm going to ping 254. I can ping my gateway. Let's see if I can ping the 100.253 address. I certainly can. Now that's the interface that is facing towards the ESG. However, if I try to ping the ESG, so if I ping 254, what we're going to notice here is it doesn't really work. Now I want to return or come to the light board for just a moment, and I want to look at this from the perspective of what we're doing. Remember, these are routers. So if I were to just draw these devices out, and I have these devices as just regular routers, and I have a Ethernet segment between them, we know that that Ethernet segment is 172.16.100.0, where this guy, who is the ESG, has an IP address of 254. This guy has an address of 253. We also know that there are 3 network segments connected to this router. Those network segments are going to be in the 172.16.101.0, 172.16.102.0, and then 172.16.103.0, where these devices all have IP addresses of 1, and it is 254 on the logical or the distributed logical router, the DLR. Now when we look at this, we are actually we're pinging, actually we're on DB, so this is database right here. So on database I'm pinging the DLR. Well, the DLR to ping the 254 works perfectly fine. To ping the 253 works perfectly fine. Why? Because these are connected resources. We're not running any dynamic routing protocols. So there's no OSPF, there's no ISIS, and obviously there's no BGP. So when we try to ping all the way over here to the ESG, which is another router, the problem is it goes across, but it's being sourced from an IP address that this resource knows nothing about. So what we have to do is we're going to have to implement some type of modification to our routing tables. That is ultimately going to end up being the application of static routes until we start talking about our routing protocols. So what I need to do is I need to configure it such that ESG, the Edge Services Gateway, knows where to send traffic to get it back to these resources. Also keep in mind that we really need to make certain that we do not lose sight of the fact that both of these resources are also firewalled. So there may be some things that we need to do to be able to take a look at this, and the plan is to look at it from the perspective of being an infrastructure person. So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to start accessing devices, and I'm going to start looking at routing constructs. So specifically, if I go in, and let's say from the hosts and clusters tab, if I go into, say, the DLR, I know I've already got one open, but I'll just open another one. I'm in the DLR, and if I type show IP route, I'm going to see my routing table. So the issue here is that I see all of those prefixes. I see the 172.100, 101, 102, and 103. Everything's copacetic here. But if I take a look at the ESG is only going to know about directly connected prefixes. So it's no different than any other router. If I come over here and say show IP route, that's exactly what I'm going to see. And in this instance, I have a default route. I have a static default route that goes down to or up to 192.168.1.1. So that's out of ESG's uplink. But I need to have connectivity that's going to go down to the internal interfaces. So when we start looking at what's happening here, ultimately what I need to do is I need to get these resources configured such that they're going to be reachable. Now to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some default routes in the ESG. So how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to go back to the networking and security tab. From here, I'm going to go down to my ESG, and I'm going to select it, ESG Lab 1, and I'm going to go down to my configurations. But what I'm going to do is now I'm going to go over to routing. And here you're going to see I can do OSPF, BGP, I can configure a number of things. But what I want to do is static routes. And I want to enter some configs here. I already have one in here. I'm going to go ahead and remove that one. So publish changes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 3 new ones, one for each of the networks. Now obviously, running a routing protocol would make this so much easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say to reach network 172.16.101, 0/24, I want you to send traffic to 172.16.100.253. And I want you to use the interface that is going to be pointing down to the DLR. In fact, I'm going to make 2 more of these. So the next one's going to be for 172.16.102, 0/24. And the next hop will again be 172.16.100.253, and I'll use that same interface. The third and final one for the VM web configuration is going to be 172.16.103, and we will say 0/24. It will be towards 172.16.100.253, and again it's going to use that same interface. And I just created the 3. Now all I need to do is publish the changes. We'll wait for that information to be propagated, and then ultimately what we should find is these prefixes should now appear in the routing table of our ESG. And just to verify that, I'm going to just up arrow here and say show IP route, and you will see that I actually have all of the prefixes. So I've got the link going to app, to database, and to web. So what we want to do is we're going to do a verification of this and make sure that everything is good to go. So to do that, I'm going to go back to my VM, well, I'm in web. Let's see if I can ping the 100.253. I can. Now can I ping the 254? And I can't. Now that's odd, because the routing table is actually functional. But remember I mentioned the firewall? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from the ESG, and I'm going to go to the firewall settings for the ESG, and I'm going to turn it off. But before I do that, there's something else I want to illustrate. So as an example, if I come over here and I ping the IP address of the Edge Services Gateway from my host, I don't have reachability. The reason being is the firewall is blocking it. So let's go ahead and stop this and publish the changes and see if that makes a change. So we're just simply waiting for this to apply. Okay, it's applied. Let's see if it makes a change for my host. My laptop now can actually hit that destination. Let's see what ends up happening from the VM's perspective. And what we see here is everything is actually working. So no matter how you slice it, whether it's a virtual machine or whether it's something that's running inside of the VM kernel, these resources are actual routers, and they behave like actual routers. From the perspective of an infrastructure person like me, that is a godsend. It makes it so much easier for me as a network person to be able to understand what's happening. And really and truly, my level of my expectation is matched based on the performance of the devices. The only real thing that's interesting to me is learning the graphical user interface. Now we're going to continue to explore this, and we're going to explore it deep, and we're going to explore it broad, just not in the Essentials course. The Essentials course is the first part of the VCAP NV for VCP6. So it's going to be, VCAP 6 NV, Network Virtualization. So I'm trying to cover as much information as I can in this course, but basically what we just did is we implemented the links between the ESG and the DLR. We took the firewall that is currently running and we disabled it inside of the ESG. We assigned those addresses of 254 and 253 up here, just like we had anticipated. And now we have all of the reachability. I have my east-west reachability being handled by my DLR, which is currently operating in my hypervisor. Later on we'll modify and expand that. And any of my north-south traffic would have to be, based on my current design, required to egress and ingress through the Edge Services Gateway. So what you have here is a fully functional network environment, just short of running routing protocols. Now there's going to be a lot of other things that we're going to be looking at in turn, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick those up in the next set of episodes. I'm Terry Vinson, and I'd very much like to thank you for learning NSX with me.